60 paratroopers are standing in full equipment on a runway. The aircraft is running, and not one of them is allowed to board yet. Before that happens, someone has to physically touch every single one of them. The parachute on their back was folded by a rigger they have never met, sealed, recorded, and issued from a common stock. That part of the system is finished. What is left is the part that happens on a living body, because a correctly packed parachute and a correctly rigged jumper are two different things. The nylon can be perfect and the person wearing it can still be wrong, and nothing inside the packed bag will tell you that. A jumper puts on a harness, a reserve on the chest, a helmet, a rucksack that can weigh as much as a person, a weapon case, and in the dark, in a hurry, wearing gloves. Every one of those steps can be done slightly wrong, so the military does not ask them to check themselves. It hands that job to a separate qualified person, and the check is not a glance. It is a hands-on inspection of every jumper, one at a time, before anyone gets on the aircraft. That person is called the Jumpmaster, not a pilot, not aircrew, not a rigger. A paratrooper who has gone back to school for a separate qualification and who on that day is responsible for everyone else in the aircraft. The course is weeks long and famous inside the airborne community for a specific reason. Most military courses are hard because the material is hard. This one is hard because it is graded on exactness rather than effort. A student is put in front of a rigged jumper and given a fixed number of minutes to find deliberately planted deficiencies, not to comment on them, to find all of them in sequence and say what each one is. Miss one, and the run does not count. Find them in the wrong order, and the run does not count. Run over time, and the run does not count. The standard is not proportional, and that is deliberate. It is deliberate because on the actual day, there is no partial credit either. The inspection is either complete or it is not, and the aircraft is not going to wait longer because the day has been long. The inspection itself has a name: Jumpmaster Personnel Inspection, universally shortened to JMPI, and it applies to every jumper on every jump, training or otherwise, no matter how many times they have done it. Every jumper means every jumper. A soldier on their 5th jump and a soldier on their 500th get the same inspection, done at the same pace, with the same hands in the same order. It applies upward as well. A general officer jumping with the unit stands in the same line and is inspected by a jumpmaster who may be 20 years younger and several ranks below them. And that is simply how it works. That detail sounds like a story about humility. It is actually a story about system design. The moment rank can shorten an inspection, the inspection stops being a control and becomes a courtesy. Subscribe. The inspection runs in a fixed sequence, and the sequence is the whole point. It starts at the top of the jumper and works down, front first, then the jumper turns and it works down the back the same way. Helmet first. The Jumpmaster checks the fit, the chin strap, and the retention, because a helmet that shifts on exit takes the jumper's vision with it at the exact second they need it. Then the main parachute where it sits against the back, the shoulder straps where they cross, and the harness where it meets the body. The Jumpmaster is not looking at the parachute. They are looking at how it is attached to a person, down to their reserve on the chest, its mounting points, its handle, and the way it sits. Then the waistband, the leg straps, the fasteners, and the whole run of webbing that carries the load when the canopy opens. Then the equipment, the rucksack attached. Below the reserve, its lowering line, its release, the weapon case, and the way it is secured, because that mass is going to move violently and everything it can catch on matters. The jumper turns. Now the back, top down again. The static line where it leaves the pack tray, the way it is routed over the shoulder, the retainer bands holding it, and the hook at the end of it. All of it done with hands, not eyes. The Jumpmaster pulls, seats, traces, and feels each item, because most of what goes wrong on a rigged jumper is invisible from a meter away and obvious under a thumb. And it is done out loud in a working rhythm. One jumper every minute or two, dozens of them in a row, while the aircraft engines are already turning somewhere behind the line. Before any of that, the Jumpmaster has already run a refresher for the whole group on the ground. The same drills, the same door position, the same emergency procedures, rehearsed out loud on the day of the jump, every time. Experienced jumpers sit through it exactly like new ones. The refresher is not there to teach anyone something they do not know. It is there so that nobody walks to an aircraft on a memory that is 3 months old. So what is actually being looked for? Not damage. Damage was the rigger's problem, and it was handled in a building with long tables. What the Jumpmaster is looking for is a set of very ordinary human errors. A twisted strap, webbing that has taken a half-turn somewhere along its run so that under load it will not lie flat and will not spread the force the way the design assumes it will. A static line routed incorrectly. The line that is going to open the parachute has one correct path over the shoulder and several plausible-looking wrong ones that a tired person can produce in the dark without noticing. Equipment worn over the harness instead of under it. It looks tidier that way, it feels fine on the ground, and it puts a bag exactly where a strap needs to travel when the canopy takes the weight. A fastener that is engaged but not locked. Most hardware on a harness has two states that look nearly identical from outside and behave completely differently under a hard load, which is why it is checked by hand. Retainer bands that are missing or wrong. They are small rubber loops. They cost almost nothing, and they are the only thing keeping a length of static line lying flat instead of hanging in a loop. Loose ends. Any tape, cord, or strap end that is not stowed is a thing that can wrap around another thing. And the entire equipment layout of a paratrooper is designed around leaving nothing free. None of these are exotic. Every one of them is the kind of mistake a competent, well-trained adult makes when they are rigging themselves at 2 in the morning in a hangar, which is exactly when it is done. Which brings up the question that makes the whole thing make sense. Why is the inspection done in a fixed order at all, rather than starting wherever something looks suspicious? Because attention is not evenly distributed. A person scanning freely goes to whatever is visually interesting, and the things that go wrong on a harness are almost never the visually interesting parts. A fixed sequence removes the choice. The Jumpmaster is not deciding what to check next. They are executing a path, and the check that gets skipped is not the one that seemed boring, because none of them can be skipped. It also makes the inspection interruptible. If the line stops, a Jumpmaster knows exactly where they were, because position in the sequence is a place on a body, not a memory of what they had already looked at, and it makes the inspection transferable. Any qualified Jumpmaster can pick up the same jumper and continue, because the order is not personal preference. It is the same order everywhere in the force. That is the same idea as the packing shed, applied to a person instead of a canopy. Do not rely on the inspector being sharp today. Build a procedure that produces the same inspection when they are not. Now, the part that gives the Jumpmaster their actual weight in the operation. If something is wrong, the jumper does not board. Not after a discussion, not after being talked around. They step out of the line. Most of the time, that is a 30-second problem. The deficiency is corrected on the spot. The jumper is re-inspected from the beginning of the sequence, and they get back in the line and board. Re-inspected from the beginning matters, not from the point where the problem was found. Once something has been unfastened and refastened, everything downstream of it is a new configuration and gets looked at again. Sometimes it is not a 30-second problem, and the jumper does not jump that day. That is treated as a completely ordinary outcome. Nobody's day is ruined because being pulled from a lift is not a judgment about a person, and the authority scales up. A Jumpmaster can hold the aircraft, and if the problem is not with one jumper, but with a condition, they can stop the drop entirely, with 60 people rigged and an aircraft burning fuel. Some of those stopping conditions are not about people at all. Surface wind above a set limit stops the drop, and the limit is a published number rather than an assessment of how strong the wind feels on the day. That authority does not come from rank, because it frequently exceeds their rank. It comes from the position on that aircraft, on that day, and it is one of the few places in the military where that is written down so plainly, and they are not doing it alone. The aircraft carries more than one qualified Jumpmaster and a safety, so the door, the anchor cable, and the jumpers each have someone assigned to them rather than one person covering everything. Once everyone is inspected and loaded, the environment changes completely. The ramp closes, the aircraft takes off, and the inside of it becomes one of the worst places to communicate that anyone has ever tried to work in. It is extremely loud. Everyone is wearing a helmet, Nobody has a free hand. The jumpers are packed shoulder to shoulder in 2 rows facing each other, and half of them cannot see the front of the aircraft at all. So the whole final sequence runs on a fixed set of shouted commands, each one paired with a hand signal, and each one repeated down the line by the jumpers themselves so it reaches the far end. Get ready. Outboard personnel, stand up. Inboard personnel, stand up. Hook up. Check static lines. Check equipment. Sound off for equipment check. Stand by. Go. The order inside them is deliberate too. The outboard rows stand first and hook up, then the inboard rows, so that 2 lines form without 60 people trying to stand up in the same aisle at once. They are short on purpose. Every one of them is 2 or 3 syllables that survive being shouted over 4 engines, and none of them can be confused with any other one in the list. Hook up is the moment the parachute stops being luggage. Each jumper clips their static line to a steel cable running the length of the aircraft, and from then on, the aircraft itself will open the parachute. That cable is a fixed part of the aircraft, running overhead from the front to the door, rated for the whole load of jumpers, and it is checked as its own item rather than assumed to be fine because it is structural. Check static lines has each jumper trace the line of the person in front of them from the hook down over the shoulder to the pack tray. The person who cannot see their own back is covered by the person behind. Sound off for equipment check runs the confirmation from the back of the aircraft forward, 1 number at a time, ending with the lead jumper telling the Jumpmaster that all the jumpers behind them are ready. So the inspection that started on the runway with 1 qualified person in a fixed sequence has become a second distributed inspection carried out by everyone on board, on each other, in the air. Meanwhile, the Jumpmaster has their own sequence at the door, and it starts with the door itself. Before anyone goes near it, they check the edges, the frame, and the outside surfaces around it. Then they lean out into a 200-kilometer-an-hour airstream, secured by a safety, and look forward and down. They are checking the air the jumpers are about to enter and confirming the ground below is the right ground. Identifying the ground is a real task, not a formality. The Jumpmaster is looking for the features of a specific drop zone from a moving aircraft and confirming that the release point is where the plan says it is. Then the jumpers go, and the spacing between them is its own controlled quantity. A 1-second interval at that speed is roughly 70 meters of separation between one canopy and the next. At night, none of this changes. The same sequence, the same commands, the same hand signals, done under low light with visibility reduced to a few meters, which is precisely why the sequence never varies in daylight either. And they are counted. Out of the aircraft and again on the ground, because the entire exercise ends with a number that has to match the number that got on, and no part of that is left to impression. And after the last jumper is gone, the static lines are still there, dozens of them streaming outside the aircraft. Recovering them back inside and stowing them is its own procedure, run before the aircraft does anything else. Step back from all of it, and the shape is the same shape as the packing shed, 1 layer further along. Nobody is trusted to check themselves, and no check depends on a person being unusually alert. The rigger does not inspect their own packing alone. The jumper does not inspect their own harness. The Jumpmaster does not decide what to look at. The commands do not depend on being heard the first time. Every one of those is the same move repeated. Take a task that would otherwise rest on one person's attention and hand it to a procedure, a second person, or both. Which is why the Jumpmaster's authority to stop everything is not a dramatic power. It is the last piece of the same design. A control that cannot stop the process is not a control at all. And like the rigger, the Jumpmaster does the job best when nothing about it is memorable. The line moves, the aircraft loads, the commands run, and 60 people leave an aircraft in under a minute. Then the last one is out of the door, the aircraft turns for home, and every one of those people is now somewhere between the aircraft and a field, with the checking finished and nothing left to hand off. What happens in the 40 seconds that follow, how they are taught to meet the ground, and what a drop zone looks like in the first minutes after 60 people land on it, is the next one.